My name is Sloan Martinez. I'm 28, and the day my world imploded started with a simple notification on my phone. I was sitting in my corner office at the marketing firm I'd worked 3 years to get promoted at when my banking app pinged. Account balance $47.23. 20 minutes earlier, it had been $127,000. My entire life savings that I'd trusted my parents to help me manage in our joint account. Then came the text from Mom, haha. Thanks for the vacation fund, honey. Your brother really needed this for his new business. Family first. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. They'd taken everything. Every penny I'd saved for my dream house, my emergency fund, the money I'd set aside for Dad's medical bills. But what they didn't know was that their sweet, naive daughter had learned a few things about revenge in the corporate world. And I was about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. Before we dive into how I systematically dismantled their perfect little scam, I want to know, where are you watching from? Have you ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most? Hit that like button if you're ready for some on-rose, serious family karma. And don't forget to subscribe, because this revenge story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when they realize exactly who they messed with. Growing up, everyone always said the Martinez family was picture perfect. My parents, Elena and Roberto, ran a small but successful catering business in our suburban Arizona town. They drove matching white SUVs, hosted elaborate Christmas parties, and never missed church on Sundays. To outsiders, we looked like the American dream wrapped in Hispanic family values. But I learned early that perfection was just another product my parents marketed to the world. My younger brother, Carlos, had always been the golden child. While I was getting straight A's and working part-time jobs to save for college, Carlos was getting arrested for underage drinking and crashing Dad's truck into a mailbox. But somehow, everything was always Sloan will handle it or Sloan understands. When Carlos got kicked out of 3 different colleges, guess who co-signed his student loans? When he needed a down payment for his first apartment, guess whose savings account got raided? The joint account had been Dad's idea when I graduated college. Mija, he'd said, using that warm voice that always made me melt, we want to help you save smarter. Your mother and I have experience with investments. Plus, this way we can help you with emergencies. I should have seen the red flags. The way Mom's eyes lit up whenever she talked about our money. How Dad always changed the subject when I asked about specific investment details. The mysterious transfers that were always explained away as portfolio rebalancing or better interest rates. For 3 years, I deposited my paychecks religiously. I lived in a cramped studio apartment, drove a 15-year-old Honda, and bought groceries with coupons while watching my account grow. I trusted them because family was supposed to be sacred. Because good daughters didn't question their parents' wisdom. The morning of the theft, I'd been planning to finally ask about withdrawing money for a house down payment. I'd found the perfect little craftsman home in a quiet neighborhood, something I'd dreamed about since college. I was going to surprise them with the news over dinner, show them the listing, maybe even ask Dad to come look at it with me. Instead, I spent my lunch break in my car crying and calling the bank. The customer service representative's voice was professionally sympathetic as she confirmed what I already knew: 3 authorized account holders had made a large withdrawal that morning. Elena Martinez, Roberto Martinez, and Carlos Martinez, all perfectly legal, all devastating. That afternoon I called Mom. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and cheerful like she'd just won the lottery. Sloan. We were just talking about you, Mom. What happened to our account? A pause. Then that laugh, the one she used when she was about to gaslight me into believing black was white. Oh, honey, Carlos had this amazing business opportunity. You know how hard things have been for him since the restaurant job didn't work out. We figured you'd understand. You make good money now. That was my money, Mom. All of it. It's family money, Mija. And family helps family. Besides, Carlos is going to pay it back once his business takes off. This is just temporary. I knew it wasn't temporary. Carlos's previous business opportunities included a failed food truck, a pyramid scheme selling energy drinks, and a cryptocurrency investment that lost $8,000 in 2 weeks. But what gutted me wasn't just the money. It was the casual way she dismissed 3 years of my life, my dreams, my sacrifice. That night I sat in my empty apartment and did something I'd never done before. I researched my parents. Really researched them. Their business records, their personal finances, their social media presence. What I found made my blood run cold. They weren't struggling. They weren't even middle class. The catering business was thriving. They owned 2 rental properties, and Mom's Instagram was full of expensive dinners and weekend trips. They'd been playing poor while sitting on a small fortune, and I'd been their personal ATM for years. But the real kicker came when I dug into Carlos's finances. His failed businesses, they'd all been funded by mysterious cash injections that happened to coincide with large withdrawals from our joint account. The boy couldn't hold a job for more than 6 months, but somehow he'd been living in a luxury apartment and driving a BMW. I'd been subsidizing their lies for years, and I'd been too trusting to see it. The next morning, I did something that would have horrified the old Sloane. I called in sick and spent the day becoming a detective. My parents had made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly how much I'd learned about research and investigation during my marketing career. When you spend your days tracking consumer behavior and analyzing data patterns, you develop certain skills that translate beautifully to uncovering family fraud. I started with public records. Property deeds, business licenses, tax liens, all the boring paperwork that most people never think to check. What I discovered was a web of financial deceit that went back almost a decade. The catering business wasn't just successful, it was pulling in nearly $500,000 annually. They owned their house outright, plus 2 rental properties in Phoenix that brought in $4,000 a month in passive income. Mom's little side job doing wedding planning, she was charging $15,000 per event and booking 2 weddings every weekend during peak season. But the most infuriating discovery was Carlos's real situation. My struggling baby brother had been listed as a co-owner of one of their rental properties since he was 22. He'd never paid rent, never held a steady job for more than a few months, and according to his social media, spent most of his time traveling between Vegas, Miami, and Los Angeles. The student loans I'd co-signed, he'd defaulted on them 18 months ago, and my credit had been taking hits that I'd somehow missed. The apartment I thought he was barely affording. It was a luxury loft downtown that cost $3,200 a month, more than my entire salary after taxes. I printed everything. Bank statements, property records, business filings, Carlos's social media posts showing off expensive watches and vacation photos. I created a timeline that showed exactly how much money had been funneled from our joint account into their various schemes over the years. The total was staggering, $184,000 over 3 years. They hadn't just stolen my recent savings, they'd been systematically draining every deposit I'd made since college graduation. Money I'd thought was earning interest had been financing their lifestyle upgrades and Carlos's extended adolescence. But documentation was only the first step. I needed to understand their vulnerabilities, their pressure points, the places where their perfect facade was most fragile. So I did something that felt deliciously sneaky. I started paying attention to their social media with a detective's eye. Mom's Instagram was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Photos of expensive dinners, tagged with locations and dates, that contradicted every sob story they'd fed me about tight finances. Dad's Facebook showed him at exclusive golf courses and posting pictures of his new baby. A $40,000 fishing boat he'd bought 3 months earlier. Carlos was even worse. His stories were full of bottle service receipts, designer shopping bags, and videos of him throwing money at strip clubs. The timestamps on these posts corresponded perfectly with the large withdrawals from our account. They weren't just thieves. They were sloppy thieves who documented their crimes for social media clout. The planning phase took me 2 weeks. Every evening after work, I'd come home and refine my strategy. I studied their routines, their weaknesses, their greatest fears. Dad's biggest terror was public embarrassment. He'd rather die than have the church community see him as anything less than a pillar of respectability. Mom's Achilles heel was her business reputation. She'd spent years building her image as a trustworthy wedding planner, and that credibility was everything to her. Carlos was different. He didn't care about reputation because he'd never built one. But he did care about comfort, about maintaining his lifestyle without any actual effort. Take away his safety net and he'd crumble like tissue paper in rain. I needed to hit them where it would hurt most: their money, their reputation, and their future security. But I also needed to be smart about it. I couldn't just lash out in anger. I needed surgical precision that would leave them with no doubt about who had orchestrated their downfall. The beautiful thing about revenge is that when you take time to plan it properly, your targets usually provide you with all the ammunition you need. My family had spent 3 years giving me detailed documentation of their fraud, their lifestyle, and their vulnerabilities. Now it was time to use it. The hardest part about planning revenge isn't the logistics. It's maintaining the performance. For 3 weeks after discovering their theft, I had to pretend everything was normal. I had to take Mom's calls about Carlos's progress with his new business. I had to smile at Dad's texts about family dinner this Sunday. I had to act like the same trusting daughter who'd been funding their lies for years. But while I was playing the role of sweet Sloane, I was systematically setting up their destruction. The first move was the easiest. I contacted a forensic accountant who specialized in family financial fraud. Jennifer Chen came highly recommended by a lawyer friend, and when I showed her my documentation, her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "This is textbook financial elder abuse in reverse," she said, spreading out the bank statements across her conference table. "They've been using your trust and family obligation to systematically drain your assets. The paper trail is so clear it's almost insulting to your intelligence." Jennifer's investigation went deeper than even my detective work had revealed. She traced money flows that showed how my parents had been using our joint account as a personal slush fund for years. But the real bombshell came when she discovered something I'd missed: they'd been filing fraudulent tax returns. "Look at this," Jennifer said, pointing to a form. "They've been claiming Carlos as a dependent, while he's been earning unreported income from the rental property. And they've been writing off business expenses for personal vacations by claiming they were client entertainment. Tax fraud." I almost laughed at how perfectly it fit their pattern of casual criminality. But the IRS would come later. First, I wanted to watch them squirm. The second phase involved social engineering, a skill I'd learned from years of marketing research. I created fake social media accounts and started following their business pages, their friends, their church community. I wanted to understand exactly who they were trying to impress and what would humiliate them most. What I discovered was that their entire social circle was built on the image of the successful, generous Martinez family. Dad was treasurer of the church finance committee. Mom was president of the local small business association. They regularly donated to charity events and hosted fundraisers at their house. Their reputation was their most valuable asset, which made it my primary target. The third phase was the most delicate. I needed to document their current activities without them knowing I was watching. So I hired a private investigator. A decision that felt simultaneously empowering and completely insane. Marcus Webb was a former police detective who specialized in white-collar crime. When I explained the situation, he didn't bat an eye. "Family fraud cases are the worst," he said. "The victims usually feel too guilty to pursue justice." "But you're not most victims, are you?" Marcus confirmed what I'd suspected. Carlos wasn't just unemployed, he was actively dealing marijuana out of his luxury apartment. Mom wasn't just overcharging for wedding planning, She was skimming money from vendor payments and pocketing the difference. Dad's catering business was operating with several health code violations that he'd been bribing inspectors to overlook. My perfect family wasn't just greedy, they were criminals. But I needed more than evidence. I needed the perfect moment to deploy it. That moment came when Carlos posted an Instagram story from a $300 per night resort in Cabo, flashing a roll of cash and bragging about his successful investments. The location tag and timestamp confirmed he was spending my stolen money on a vacation that cost more than most people's monthly salary. But more importantly, he'd just given me the opening I needed. I waited until he was scheduled to return. Information I'd gathered from Mom's casual mention of picking him up from the airport Sunday evening. Then I sent a text to the family group chat, something I'd never done before because I usually called individually. Hey family, can we do dinner Sunday night? I have some exciting news to share about my new investment strategy. I've learned so much about money management lately. Can't wait to tell you all about it. Mom responded within minutes, of course Mija, we'll make your favorite carnitas. Dad's so proud of how responsible you've become with finances. Dad's reply was even more infuriating. That's my smart girl. Family dinners are the best time to share wisdom. Carlos, probably hungover on a plane, just sent a thumbs up emoji. They had no idea they were confirming their attendance at their own execution. The final piece fell into place when I realized I didn't just want to expose them. I wanted to do it in front of an audience that mattered. So I sent another text, this one dripping with fake enthusiasm. Actually, would it be okay if I invited a few people? I'm so excited about my financial journey, and I know Tia Rosa and the Hernandezes would love to hear about it too. Plus, didn't you mention Father Miguel was looking for young professionals to speak to the youth group about money management? The family group chat exploded with excited responses. Mom started planning an elaborate dinner party. Dad suggested inviting his business partner and his wife. Even Carlos perked up, probably thinking he'd get to show off in front of family friends. Perfect. An audience would make their humiliation complete and ensure the story spread through their entire social circle within hours. But the most beautiful part of my plan wasn't the public exposure. It was that I was about to use their own greed against them. Because I wasn't just planning to reveal their theft, I was going to offer them a choice that would expose exactly who they really were. Sunday dinner was going to be very interesting. Sunday evening arrived with typical Arizona spring weather. Clear skies and the kind of gentle warmth that made everything feel possible. I spent the afternoon getting ready with the care of someone preparing for battle. I chose a dress that looked expensive but had actually come from a clearance rack, styled my hair in the soft waves Mom always complimented, and practiced my smile in the mirror until it looked genuinely excited rather than predatory. I arrived at my childhood home exactly on time, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the mask of dutiful daughter I'd perfected over the years. The house looked exactly the same as always, Southwestern decor that Mom had spent thousands perfecting, family photos covering every surface, and the lingering smell of Dad's cologne mixed with whatever elaborate meal was simmering in the kitchen. Mija. Mom's voice carried from the kitchen, bright with the kind of enthusiasm she only showed when she had an audience. The dinner party had grown beyond my initial suggestion. Apparently, word had spread through their social circle that Elena Martinez was hosting one of her famous gatherings, and people had invited themselves. The guest list was perfect for my purposes. Tia Rosa and her husband, the Hernandez family from church, Dad's business partner Miguel, and his wife Carmen, and Father Miguel himself, who'd apparently been excited to hear about young, professional financial planning. Even Mrs. Chen from the neighborhood association had shown up, probably hoping for free food and gossip. Carlos was holding court in the living room, regaling Miguel with stories about his investment portfolio and business ventures. He looked tanned and relaxed from his Cabo vacation, wearing a designer shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. When he saw me, his smile was the practiced charm of someone who'd never faced consequences for anything. Sloan, there's my brilliant sister. I hear you're becoming quite the financial expert. I've learned so much lately, I replied, letting him hug me while I noted the expensive watch on his wrist. You could say it's been eye-opening. Dad appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers, his face beaming with pride. Everyone, our Sloan, is going to share some wisdom about money management. She's always been the smart one in the family. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Dinner was elaborate, even by Mom's standards. Carnitas, that had been slow cooking all day. Fresh tortillas. 3 different salsas. Mexican rice. Refried beans and a dessert spread that could have fed 30 people. She'd gone all out, probably using money from my stolen account, to finance this performance of generous hospitality. As we ate, I played my role perfectly. I asked Carlos about his vacation, complimented Mom on the food, and listened with apparent fascination as Dad told stories about his latest catering contracts. I waited until everyone was relaxed, wine glasses refilled, and the conversation naturally turning toward the promised financial discussion. So Sloan, Father Miguel said, leaning forward with genuine interest, your parents tell me you've become quite sophisticated with investments. The young people in our community could use guidance about building wealth responsibly. Perfect setup. Actually, Father, I've learned more about money in the past month than in my entire life, I said, reaching into my purse for the folder I'd prepared. It's amazing what you discover when you start really paying attention to where money comes from and where it goes. I stood up, still smiling, and moved to the head of the table where I could see everyone's faces. Mom looked pleased. Dad was practically glowing with parental pride. Carlos was checking his phone, probably posting about the family dinner with the fam for his Instagram story. The most important lesson I've learned, I continued, is about trust. About how family relationships can sometimes mask financial abuse. About how people you love most can systematically steal from you while making you feel grateful for the privilege. The mood in the room shifted subtly. Mom's smile flickered. Dad's eyebrows drew together in confusion. For example, I said, opening my folder and pulling out bank statements. Did you know that over the past 3 years, someone has been using my trust to steal $184,000 from our joint family account? The silence was deafening. Forks stopped moving. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. Carlos finally looked up from his phone. These documents show systematic theft disguised as family financial planning. I placed the first set of papers on the table. Transfers that coincided perfectly with luxury vacations, designer purchases, and my brother's various business ventures that somehow never required him to actually work. Mom's face had gone pale. Sloan, what are you? I'm sharing financial wisdom, Mom. Just like you asked. I smiled at our guests who were staring in fascination. Did you know my parents own 2 rental properties worth over $800,000, while telling me they needed help paying Dad's medical bills? I placed property records on the table. Tia Rosa leaned forward to read them. Or that Carlos here has been listed as a co-owner of rental property since he was 22, while I co-signed student loans he defaulted on 18 months ago. More papers. He's been living in a $3,200 a month luxury apartment, while telling everyone he's struggling to find work. Carlos had gone completely white. Sloan, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I understand that this family has been running a con game on me for years, while I played the role of the grateful daughter. I turned to Father Miguel. Father, what would you call it when people systematically steal money while manipulating the victim's emotions and family loyalty? Father Miguel's expression was grim. I would call it a form of abuse, Sloan. The room erupted. Voices overlapping chairs, scraping the sound of people trying to process what they'd just witnessed. But I wasn't finished yet. The beautiful thing about documentation, I said, raising my voice slightly, is that it tells the whole story. Bank records, property deeds, tax filings, social media posts. It all creates a perfect timeline of fraud. I placed my final stack of papers on the table. These are copies of everything I've sent to the IRS regarding unreported income and fraudulent business deductions. Also, copies of what I've sent to the health department about food service violations and to the state licensing board about wedding planning fraud. Dad stood up so fast his chair fell over. You sent what? Everything, Dad. Every crime, every lie, every dollar you stole. I documented it all and sent it to every relevant authority. I looked around the table at our guests who were staring in shock. Because family isn't about blood loyalty, it's about trust and respect and honesty. And this family lost the right to call me daughter the day you chose money over love. The explosion that followed was everything I'd hoped for and more. The aftermath of that dinner party was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Within hours, the story of the Martinez family financial scandal was spreading through our tight-knit community like wildfire. I sat in my apartment the next morning drinking coffee and watching the consequences unfold through social media and increasingly frantic phone calls that I didn't answer. By Monday, the health department had arrived at Dad's catering kitchen for a surprise inspection. Apparently, my anonymous tip about food safety violations had triggered an immediate investigation. They found expired ingredients, improper storage temperatures, and evidence of the bribes Dad had been paying to inspectors for years. The business license was suspended pending a full review. Mom's wedding planning certification was suspended by Tuesday. 3 different clients had called the state licensing board after seeing social media posts about Sunday's dinner, and when investigators looked into the vendor payment discrepancies I documented, they found a pattern of financial irregularities going back 2 years. But Carlos got the most immediate consequences. On Wednesday, his luxury apartment was raided by police following an anonymous tip about drug distribution. They found enough marijuana to charge him with intent to sell, plus financial records showing he'd been using the apartment as a base for his dealing operation. His BMW was seized as evidence of drug profits. The beautiful irony was that their own social media presence had provided law enforcement with timestamps and evidence they needed. Carlos's Instagram stories showing off cash and drugs. Mom's Facebook posts about expensive dinners during the same periods she claimed financial hardship. Dad's pictures of his boat and golf trips. It all became evidence of their fraud and money laundering. My phone rang constantly. Voicemails from Mom crying and begging me to fix this misunderstanding. Texts from Dad alternating between rage and desperate attempts at emotional manipulation. Carlos sent a single message, "I hope you're happy now." I was. But the real satisfaction came when I received a call from Jennifer Chen, my forensic accountant, on Thursday morning. "Sloan, you need to know that your documentation was so thorough. The IRS is launching a full audit going back 7 years. They're treating this as a criminal tax evasion case, not just civil penalties. Criminal charges." The words sent a thrill through me that I hadn't expected. What does that mean exactly? It means your parents are looking at potential prison time, not just fines. Systematic tax fraud, money laundering, financial abuse. These are federal crimes. The prosecutors are very interested in your case because it shows clear intent and pattern of behavior. I hung up and sat in my quiet apartment processing the magnitude of what I'd set in motion. Part of me expected to feel guilty or conflicted, but all I felt was a deep sense of satisfaction. They'd stolen my trust, my money, and my future. Now they were facing the consequences of treating family like a bank they could rob without consequences. The community response was swift and brutal. Father Miguel announced that Dad would be stepping down from the Church Finance Committee pending investigation. The Small Business Association voted to remove Mom from her leadership position. Their social circle, built on years of carefully cultivated image management, crumbled overnight. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source, their own extended family. Tia Rosa, who'd witnessed the entire dinner party revelation, had apparently spent the week making phone calls. By Friday, I received a text from my cousin Maria Sloan. "We had no idea what they were doing to you. The whole family is horrified. We're taking up a collection to help you recover what they stole." It turned out that my parents had been telling different lies to different family members for years. They'd borrowed money from Tio Eduardo, claiming business troubles, while posting vacation photos on Facebook. They'd asked Tia Rosa for help with Carlos's medical expenses while he was posting from expensive restaurants. They'd collected money for my college fund from various relatives, money I'd never seen. The family I thought had always favored them was actually disgusted by their behavior. Cousins I rarely spoke to reached out to offer support. Aunts and uncles who'd seemed distant at family gatherings admitted they'd been keeping their distance because they suspected something wasn't right about my parents' financial stories. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Sloan Martinez, this is Detective Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to schedule an interview regarding the complaint you filed against your parents." Financial Crimes Unit. This was really happening. "Of course, Detective. When would be convenient? How about this afternoon? We've reviewed your documentation, and I have to say it's some of the most thorough evidence I've seen in a family fraud case. We're also coordinating with federal investigators regarding the tax issues." I scheduled the interview for that afternoon, then spent the morning organizing even more evidence I'd been collecting. Bank records going back 5 years, screenshots of Carlos's social media posts documenting his drug-dealing photos of their assets that contradicted their claims of financial hardship. The detective interview lasted 3 hours. Detective Rodriguez was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human greed. "Miss Martinez, in 20 years of financial crimes investigation, I've never seen such systematic family fraud. Your parents weren't just stealing your money, they were running a sophisticated con game using family loyalty as manipulation." She showed me additional evidence they'd uncovered. My parents had been forging my signature on investment documents, had opened credit cards in my name that I didn't know about, and had been using my social security number for various financial applications. The federal prosecutors are building a case that could result in 10 to 15 years in prison for your parents, and 5 to 7 years for your brother. Financial abuse, tax evasion, identity theft, money laundering, they hit every major category of white-collar crime. 15 years. I tried to imagine my parents in prison uniforms, tried to picture Carlos in a cell instead of his luxury apartment. The mental image should have made me sad, but instead, I felt only a profound sense of justice. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait for the grand jury indictment. But based on your evidence and what we've uncovered in our investigation, indictments are almost certain. Your family is looking at serious federal time." I drove home that evening through the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood, past the house where I'd grown up, believing family meant unconditional love and support. Now, I knew better. Family meant whatever you made it mean, and some people made it mean exploitation and theft. But for the first time in months, I felt free. Free from their manipulation, free from their lies, free from the weight of trying to be the perfect grateful daughter while they systematically destroyed my future. The reckoning was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse watching my parents and brother face sentencing for crimes that carried a combined total of 43 felony counts. The courtroom was packed with family members, community leaders, and local news reporters who'd been following what the media had dubbed the Martinez family fraud case. Mom wore a conservative black dress and had aged 10 years in 6 months. Dad's hands shook as he stood before the judge. Carlos, true to form, looked like he still couldn't believe there were actual consequences for his actions. Judge Patricia Williams reviewed their plea agreements with the cold efficiency of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human selfishness. The prosecutors had presented my case as a textbook example of family financial abuse, and the evidence was so overwhelming that my parents' lawyers had advised immediate guilty pleas. Elena Martinez. Judge Williams began, "You are sentenced to 8 years in federal prison," followed by 3 years supervised probation and restitution of $127,000, plus interest and penalties. Mom's shoulders shook as the reality hit her. 8 years. She'd be 62 when she got out her wedding planning business, permanently destroyed her reputation in ruins. Roberto Martinez, "You are sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised probation and joint restitution responsibility." Dad didn't react visibly, but I saw him mouth something that looked like a prayer. 10 years for the man who'd taught me that family loyalty was sacred while systematically violating that trust for profit. Carlos Martinez, "You are sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for financial fraud and drug distribution, followed by 3 years supervised probation." Carlos finally broke tears, streaming down his face as the bailiff moved toward him. 6 years for the golden child, who'd never been held accountable for anything in his life. The total restitution ordered was $184,000 plus penalties and interest, bringing the amount to nearly $250,000. Their assets would be seized and liquidated: the house, the rental properties, the catering equipment, Dad's beloved boat, everything they'd bought with money they'd stolen from me and others. But the money was never really the point. As I watched them being led away in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just peace. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to wonder if the people who claimed to love me were lying. I didn't have to question my instincts or make excuses for their behavior. I was free. The aftermath has been transformative in ways I never anticipated. The insurance settlements and asset liquidation will eventually return most of what they stole, but more importantly, I've built a life that's truly mine. I left the marketing firm and started my own consulting business, specializing in helping other family fraud victims navigate the legal and emotional recovery process. The community response surprised me. Instead of being ostracized for destroying my own family, I've been embraced by people who respect what it took to stand up for myself. Father Miguel asked me to speak to young adults about financial boundaries and family manipulation. The Small Business Association invited me to join their board. Even former clients of my parents' businesses have reached out to apologize for not seeing the signs earlier. My real family, the cousins, aunts, and uncles who were also being manipulated by my parents' lies, have rallied around me in ways I never expected. We've grown closer through shared recognition that love isn't about blind loyalty, it's about honesty, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Carlos's girlfriend, someone I'd barely known, contacted me 3 months into his sentence. Apparently, she discovered that he'd been stealing from her too, using money from our joint account to maintain their relationship while she paid for everything from groceries to rent. She thanked me for exposing him, saying it saved her from years of financial abuse. The legal proceedings revealed even more victims. 3 of Mom's wedding clients came forward with evidence that she'd stolen vendor payments totaling over $40,000. 2 families from our church discovered that Dad had been inflating catering bills and pocketing the difference from church event budgets. The investigation expanded far beyond my case, revealing a pattern of financial abuse that had affected dozens of people over nearly a decade. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome has been my work with other family fraud victims. Through my consulting business, I've helped 17 people navigate similar situations: adult children whose parents stole their identities, siblings who discovered family businesses were built on fraud, spouses who learned their partners had been systematically lying about finances for years. Each case reminds me that what happened to me wasn't personal. It was pathological. Some people view family relationships as opportunities for exploitation rather than love. Recognizing that isn't cynicism. It's wisdom. The hardest part hasn't been missing my family. it's been grieving the family I thought I had. The parents who raised me to value honesty while living lives built on deception. The brother I'd protected and supported while he laughed about my naivety behind my back. The family dinners and holiday traditions that were apparently just elaborate performances designed to maintain my trust and compliance. But I've learned that family is a choice, not just a biological accident. My chosen family now includes friends who celebrate my victories without expecting me to subsidize theirs, colleagues who respect my boundaries, and a community that values integrity over image management. 6 months from now, my parents will have been in prison for a full year. Carlos will still have 5 years left on his sentence. I'll be 30 years old, debt-free, living in the house I bought with money I earned and saved myself, surrounded by people who see my success as something to celebrate rather than exploit. So here's my question for all of you watching. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Have you found yourself making excuses for people who claim to love you while treating you like an ATM? Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to enable someone else's destructive behavior, even when that someone is family. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts on family boundaries and justice. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama and life lessons. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize your own well-being over someone else's comfort. Thank you for listening to my journey from victim to victor. Here's to building families based on love and respect rather than manipulation and exploitation. Remember, blood doesn't make family, and family doesn't give anyone the right to abuse your trust. Sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no, setting boundaries, and walking away from people who refuse to treat you with basic human decency. Stay strong, protect your peace, and never let anyone convince you that their comfort is more important than your dignity.